Comments on Amy to get back. Second. Yeah, my God. try to find another room, but
I mean, is it gonna be like that from like the second Monday of every month? Because
So-
we haven't-
so correct. So it's 2 weeks of January. Four recommendations. January, as right now, it's scheduled to be January 10th, January 21st, Tuesday and a month. We're giving you over a month and a half notice to hopefully make it easy. If there is an issue with that, please let us know. We can be flexible. We can do more polls and try to get more, make it as fair as possible. We want to use as much room as possible. Just your schedule. We all know we all have lots. Anything else you might want to mention? Just like I said, questions, comments, concerns.
Well, I would like to welcome all the members of the public. Attendance we had. Thank you all for coming. We will have time at the end of the meeting for your comments, and questions. So if you have them, you can bring it down. I think we have about 8:30. Anybody, let's say agenda first. No, we'll look at the notes. The topic of the notes up here. This group is the voting group. Anybody make a motion to accept the notice? Out? Any second?
Nice job, Justin.
All in favor? Now are going to look. Agenda, you also got early. Anybody have a motion on the agenda or add? Any motion about that? We need a movement to move the agenda being accepted by this. Second. All in favor? Opposed? No one? We have our notes in the agenda are there.
All right, thank you, Ann. So the first portion of this meeting till about 7 o'clock, so is going to be discussion of visioning statement. It's on you guys' responses, but before we get there, I just want to throw this back up on the screen real quick. It's a little blurry, so I apologize, but essentially this is what we showed you in the very first meeting, which is basically this is help guide the decision process and the group discussion. To really see how we, Region 4, how you as the SAC can come to a consensus on different recommendations, zoning analysis, et cetera, et cetera. So, if you have an issue with something, please discuss it out loud. It would be helpful to say more. I just don't like it. Why don't you? Let's talk it. So, the goal is to really kind of get to the agreement section, right? Ideally, I may not like it, but I can live with it. But the overall, trying to get to at a minimum. Ideally, everybody's going to love everything, right? And we'll be out of here in 2 minutes. That's the goal. But in a real world, we know it's recommend. So for the visioning, and we have in front of you. These two vision statements. These are the two vision statements that were the most voted on by you as the SAC. So what staff did, he took both of these two and they looked at the comments behind it. So like for the first one, for example, a few comments included clear foundations, progress, the opportunities outlined with residents, Jim. Enough detail or broad enough to bring in as well. However, there were some questions and issues, difference of opinions. For example, first line, talking about the strong character and high quality amenities. there's no mention of growth, and I know there's mentioned, comment from some of you all, as well as, one of the last lines is issue with making progress forward. So with those comments in mind, we looked at the second version. There were also very similar comments, good ideas, promises a lot for, but there were some issues about safety. Homelessness was a comment back and forth on some of you as well. Again, no mention of growth. So what we ended up doing, we the staff ended up doing, was we kind of combined the two. Guys, a minute. It's over. So what staff want to do tonight for the first portion of this meeting is discuss. Based on your idea and your input, we did our best to interpret and put the words on paper, right? So what we want to do tonight, hopefully, hammer this out, push being finalized. We do have time reserved in the future to discuss this, but I figure the more we can get done now, in our allotted time, the better it will help us. Time for you. So that being said, is there any initial comments about this? Or I can ask them leading questions.
Okay. First, it's to me, chooses.
That's a fair point.
You know what, I kind of add another point, but I see what you're saying, because I mean, how is having a region being known for something, and then the question is like, okay, so for future planning, what are you gonna do with that? You know, does that mean status quo? Which was one of my criticisms for the first paragraph. And then also, so we had making progress towards was criticized by some in one of the earlier versions. And in this one, we've got opportunity to expand. So is that a way to soften the concept that, hey, we're going to have growth and we're going to expand things? Or like, what was the thinking behind opportunity to expand as a foundation for the future, and not expansion or growth as the foundation of the future, for the future?
Yeah, so a little bit, because the comments that reflect making progress towards, we understood that it may appear, it may come across, right? Well, what we as staff tried to do to interpret the comment was kind of do just that allow for the possibility of growth, but not necessarily committing to certain long, crazy things, but allowing for opportunities for certain possibilities to come in if they were appropriate.
What is it?
I think what, and I can't speak necessarily for the writer, but because this was from the first one, this is probably just discussing access to region as a whole. So the connection from being able to maybe transit access, because the public transit isn't necessarily super reliable. I looked on the map accidentally before I got here. It would take me an hour and a half to be a bus to get here on a 20-minute car. So I mean, that's probably the thought process. John?
I put in my comments, but I'll say it. But two things that I think are fundamentally is characterizing whether it's urban or rural. And then the other thing is, are we planning on growth? Yeah, I think even in And they. Like. That vision kind of what it is.
What else to put in there?
What the thing.
Really quick, Brian, this, so you have in front of you two, those two voted on, they see the two most popular. What staff tried to do is take those two with the comments by this, they see members creating this vision statement around.
And it kind of goes back to the very early step. Who's the primary audience? And what are they like?
So this, you got help guide through that plan. Plan's gonna, plan ideally reflects what, right? So if vision statement, the vision statement's a little more broad than specific recommendations. Get it? But the vision statement is essentially like the roadmap, right? Very broad roadmap of what you're about to read in the next couple pages.
So ultimately, are we saying as a county council person who's the primary reader, or are we talking about in the road to getting to that point? There are others who will have input to this one, all the regions.
Well, if you leave the SAC, you're going to create this. Things on other issues, those kind of things. But ideally, whatever the SAC kind of comes up with is something that we collectively, we include staff, are behind. Of course.
What is the vision statement for the region or the plan? Like how we have one.
So in an ideal world, this draft, this is perfect. Put this in our draft plan. Draft plan, clear by public, by council, by PAP, by everybody. Like it's approved. That's going to be for everybody in the future for however many history.
So vision statement, take this, but then as we move forward, we're taking the pieces out of it, and that's where we get into more detail about those pieces. So if there's not something specific that's here that we're interested in, for example, managing future growth could be done by reusing existing land that's already run down, that kind of thing, and building on top of something that's already been paved over. This doesn't necessarily have to say that, but there'll be, beyond this, there'll be other places to expand on what we mean by that.
Correct. Absolutely. That's perfect. Thank you for that. Because, for example, achieving a healthy community, what does that mean? That this is not telling me necessarily what recommendations. Recommendations will help us determine what health communities. Nothing about stop signs, anything like that. That's something that's multi sure, but nothing about potentially designating, redesignating certain things, right? That's going to be something. Vision, the right vision plan. As part of recommendation.
And this is for, we want to make sure this is a broad stroke of what we're really trying to accomplish.
Correct. Because I mean, we could make a 30-page vision statement, but then what's the point?
I can partially reiterate what I said. But when I'm talking about whether we're urban, rural, and I look at even county, city, Brick County, urbanizing, and South County is really rural. The point where we are here, try to do suburban, clearly suburban, and the only and if I'm a planner or total map of Macomb County, I'm looking at the Baltimore Washington corridor where you have multiple roads, multiple rail, two rails, multiple buses, and have higher density development. So you start talking about affordable housing, that should be the first place where you have. I know that you mentioned transfer rate development. So with the majority.
So I understand correctly, you would like to see the term or phrase suburban heritage, urban, whatever, right?
I think that summarizes perfectly everybody.
I don't think we need to do
When
that.
at the beginning of this process, I talked to 30 different people, and every one of them is around our capacity. But every one of them is dealing with concept that they have right now, it's urban nature.
And I don't think we need to vote, but I mean, it's something like, that's very much open for discussion. If everyone does agree with that, that's what I'm looking back to. So that's why we're having this conversation, where everybody. We've only done what we can do with what we got, right? So I want to bring it back to you, try to. So that's what we're. So.
John, I think when we get to managing future growth, that would be a good time to talk about the kind of growth we think we have and how we want to deal with it. I don't know, it seems like we can't say everything.
Actually, we wrote it, and that's where I.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm tag on, but in. I would I would agree with Dan. I would. I mean, again, you would.
Some point that we need to restate something or add.
Absolutely, this like, so this is not the first and only conversation of this. I believe we're going to the recommendations. Or anywhere, we need to be early to. Essentially, maybe. We're going to bring that back. We're going to bring this back.
Just gonna say that if the first sentence is gonna be some sort of establishing how we see ourselves, or where we are at this point, then maybe something about if we're defining ourselves as suburban, it could also be touched on there.
Sorry, I was someone in the parking lot, but, all right. I'm not totally sure that I'm gonna be comfortable with looking that up with based on our last. The stuff that was put on there, I was not really comfortable with at all. This is better. But the key term suburban that John's talking about is that would be more comfortable with. Seems to actually like what I see. The place where I want to live. And if it's a plainer term, then for me, it would be nice to have some like concrete terms that like a planner knows like, oh, that's a place where, you know, I'm not gonna try and railroad a bunch of like apartment buildings. I don't want to be in a place where there's a lot of work. And want to be right here and volunteers be on it. So I'm gonna be really cautious with this one. Me personally, is more comfortable signing up. That's my.
Yeah, that's fair. And that's where we're having these meetings, to really air these out, air your frustration. Provide everybody in this room productive comments. Back, help staff be able to interpret it, be able to write it, come back to you all, hopefully we'll all It's easier. Sound like. Could be a possibility.
The thing is, we're talking about residents, visitors, do we have a lot of our employees are here, and live here, I don't know if visitors is meant to like that, but possibly you could define that better for residents, visitors, employees, or work. Yeah, because that seems like kind of critical. Yeah, the workforce or something to that nature. And then the other thing. I think plan 2040, so I mean, thinking 20 years from now, if we were to put the term suburban in here, it seems to lock in the plan, everything. I mean, this, if you put something in here, it's hard to go further deeper into the plan and have something that doesn't apply to business. I understand by the purpose everyone put in here, but there certainly may be areas in Region 4 where but you know, if it's in a defined area, I'm not sure that that's. I mean, we talked about development and all these other things, but I think about sprawl growth and things of that nature. I'm not saying that the whole region needs to flip to something that's not suburban, but I certainly am not comfortable with locking in what is generally thought of as being not a tool, urbanizing, you know, I don't, it just feels like a bad like, you know, pull through the plan. in my opinion.
I've been hearing some things. Suburbs of that.
Yes.
It's racist or classist.
I'm not saying that, I mean, you know, I mean,
That's, I don't feel that way about. There's a feeling of they're exclusive.
I mean, they kind of isolate people from other things.
seems like this visioning statement, closing off a lot of. I would just. Something we should consider further.
Isn't the reality though that we're not gonna have a definition of suburban? You know, anywhere in appendix. I mean, so really, what we say now could be looked at totally different by appendix.
I mean, that's true. But it's just-
I mentioned, we talked about the taglines for the broad neighborhood capacity. All these others, all these communities are gonna have activity a little more about what the community is, right? And I think one thing that could be a compromise. is if something's mentioned in a certain spot, we can emphasize it. So we take Claire wants to and talk about their single family, right? Like that, how keep that how it is. If that's what it's said, maybe that's kind of reflected in some portion of somewhere else as well. But broadly, get into specifics. So it gives more
Sorry to interrupt. All right, where is this abundant water access and for whom? And what's the percentage? Which is why I was really encouraged when I saw will be known for abundant gonna edit, water access. That was in one of the other statements. I don't think that's true, but I think it's a great aspiration.
Only 2/3 of the time.
Okay,
That's not what it says. It's for on water access. We live on 3 different peninsulas. About 100.
so it's.
You can
2/3
argue whether or not this should be public or not,
Yeah,
but it's on abundant access.
okay. So is it, but I was curious, is it 2/3?
I'm looking
I mean,
at
if you, okay, but because I'd be curious as to whether, because you're right, it's an accurate statement, but it's kind of misleading. Because the public access,
We're not saying public. They're not public.
but I like this, but I think it implies, and that's why I like it will be known for abundant water access. Right, and I'm wondering,
Although the things that are. Building, we're looking at income for, so we publish everything in the cannot be on so forth, more it is.
okay, I got it. So, Bo. Oh, and, no, right, but how about the park? It doesn't say public or private parks there. But I think they, well, and we haven't talked about it, but I think that water access for people who don't live on the water or in those kind of communities would, I think it should be expanded. And I think it should be a vision.
One of the biggest state parks. Where a million people walk from access to.
But there's tons of county-owned property that abuts the water that the public can't use.
I think there's tons that they can use.
So the Sullivan's Cove is one. If you go across, it's not a region 4. Valentine Creek is another. Severn Run is pretty poor access. That's also not a region 4.
You're not gonna develop. That's the argument, right? You want to keep things pristine, so it keeps the headway waters clean.
So what are the
things
no
like that.
parking?
So
How
it's not
come?
about hiking it.
But it's only for the, it's only the, practically, only the neighbors can get there because lack of signage and the signs that are there say no parking.
So for add to that access.
You can just call, yeah, that'd be great. I like that.
On that note, so along those lines, we do have. Talking about access in general, Lorma earlier, what if we simply, what just find that, talk a little bit more about. Again, this is just a draft. We're gonna go back to these conversations, anything we have heard this past half hour, come back, redo it, get back to you guys. So again, we're not leaving this room with this finalized by any means. So. All right, let's go ahead.
We met at 6:41. We got into this place where many. All these words. Trying to get the perfect word. Look close, but not too close. Think about, what you think really matters that you want in there. Also, don't try to put everything in there, I would say, because otherwise it's gonna start losing meaning. So what we heard so far is about urbanity versus vanity, about water access. Look at that and see, what other things you think, don't really need to be there, or maybe they need to be there, and tell us again. We don't have so much time now, but, we'll take back these notes and then close it.
So, the word abundant and super. But, the first word it's bringing up a lot of. And my question, is actually, I that I really value. So, talk about.
No, 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 no. No, I don't want to.
No, that was kind
Okay.
of cute.
Yeah, no, no, I'm not suggesting that. Before it's good. No, I mean, I'm just suggesting that areas where we could propose, once we get land use zoning. I mean, it's just, the whole suburban urban discussion, probably not. To me, it doesn't feel like a business statement discussion. It feels like when we get to land use zoning and the nuts and bolts, that's when you really get to determine the land use zoning, going to determine what can go on that property. So I mean, to me, if you put suburban in here, then when we get to the land use zoning, every decision, are you going to want to go back to your vision statement? Because then your plan kind of starts to fall apart. I mean, like I look at things, and if suburban's in here, we look at the shopping center across the street. Okay, well, the land use is mixed use. What does that look like? What does that look like in suburban neighborhood? And then if the answer is, well, that's not suburban, but 4 stories and it has all these things, then it looks a little more compact. Even though it's not there, have more sprawl on our open space. But if you come back to the vision statement that says suburban and the room says, well, that's not suburban, then you're going to fix what could probably be a good idea. That's fun.
Land use zoning, that's the tool to really dictate a lot of things. For next year, 10 years, long time, right? Zoning's that, use zoning. I think, in my opinion, kind of reread this again. If you use the zoning and land use tool, doesn't that essentially manage the growth? Like, so I think maybe that combined together can, in fact, be the suburban area if that's what it was intended to be, or initially. How just, that's how growth. I think I'm just spitballing ideas here, so I'm just seeing what sticks with you guys. But like, that was my kind of thought process. I saw.
I just wanted to go back to my original comment when we were first dissecting this and saying how it was supposed to be a very broad type thing, and then we go into the subsections, and that's where it expands. I don't think this is where we need to be putting urban, rural, suburban in. I think it just kind of it's more wordage in there that's it's taking away from the core of what you really want in your vision statement.
I just have a clarification question about the mention of schools. What, in terms of this group and the planning and zoning, overlaps or connects with?
You're just, I think it was to emphasize how Region 4 as relatively good at the system. It's one of the gold stars.
Yeah. Will we be doing things that will facilitate that?
So then it-
Well, I guess if we're saying that this is a statement to have, you know, our ideals for what's going to be in place. How much influence do we have on schools? I'm not saying this in a way that's speculative. I don't actually know.
So I think that like, so I think it's on the same kind of breadth as trails and other recreational sites, right? Like Region 4 has fantastic ability for that, just like they have fantastic. I think what this vision statement kind of says is we don't want to lose that. We want to do whatever we got to do to continue to grow next. That's how I interpret it. I don't know what you guys think.
I mean, I just think that we're in a little bit of a loop with some developing issues with schools because of school transportation issue. And, you know, I'm not sure I would be saying it right now. I mean, I guess I'm just saying like in a statement like this. I know, but sure, but are we gonna be able to? bring those things out? Because it's not under the school.
Outside purview.
Does it belong? What's up?
So to work,
But I mean, is this quantifiable? Is this like, okay, okay, well then that's, if it's based on something like that, that's
Just be.
But this is supposed to be purely logical, it's supposed to be our vision, so it doesn't have to necessarily be based on quantifiable. But they are. And we want them to be.
one thing we can do some.
But we want them to be. this way.
Envision them
We
being
can-
there.
But we
You can hope, this is hope for. You can bring them.
That was just-
$1 billion. Once, right?
No, it's a question.
No, it's a fair question. I think for the sake of this discussion, maybe even final. Put in the 40, either or will be known. Let's solve a lot of these.
Just gonna ask a quick question. Wanna say, where do we live now? What kind of environment now and what we want to live in the future?
I'm missing a word that I wish was in there, which was, the opportunity. Words like any sort of subjective, adjective like great, but the idea is that with our plan recommendations, we're working towards this ideal scenario.
Oh, well, I think this might go to your question about what access means the second time. Should that be like community or connection or?
Right.
Okay.
That's where I think you would deem that stuff. This statement kind of spur an argument and put it more defined into specific parts.
to make it public, non-public, based on the amenities of different places. I said you get to get, you wish, but I didn't say you get to do it. At the end, though, I don't think there are means at some point where you yourself can stake a hard no, and the group can, as a majority, move on. It's acceptable piece of the discussion down the road. So while we were here, we just ran a statement for what he feels about the firm, good and great, and things like that, specifically managing suburban versus public. I think we're also at a point where if we're generally okay with this, you move the conversation along, and then when we dive into areas, you say Pasadena wants this, right? We want Smyrna Park to have a more suburban feel. We want Marley Station, if it's in our little area, to be a more urban density aspect of our community. And that's where we then heard yes and no in votes. And that might get people over the hump of this level and into the more planning discussion of, hey, public water access, what does it really mean? Where should it be? Should it be just Sandy Point, Greenberry Point, the arguments at Holly Beach Farm, the Chesapeake National Recreational Area? Like those are all points that we get to jump on later and be more specific. That's just my percent.
No, and to kind of wrap this up, as we're getting out of time. What we mentioned earlier, the consensus. Please go back and review. We'll go over this graph. We're gonna, there's gonna be times for some of you. Okay. Please voice your voice. Give us start to comments, right? So we say more than I just want. Why don't you like it? What's wrong with it? How can we make this to where you maybe good with it? You may not love it, but where can you live? Because that's the point of this. That's the point of it. You guys will be advising. You're an extension of the community, so that's what we're here to do. Really make sure everyone that you're heard. Your opportunity to speak. So we have heard a lot of good comments. We're going to make that have a totally working. So, if anyone wants to.
That's a new plan. We did this. We'll have some systems, we'll have talking about other things. And we may even want to tweak it, but you're gonna get it back to us in January.
Yeah, so, again, in December, just sent out some recommendations. That's a review. Based on what we've heard. We're gonna send it back, in a couple weeks, when we'll get it back. It's guys, very simple form. Something. January, 2 meetings in January, we'll discuss. Half an hour, we'll get the homework. February, we're going to talk about some recommendations. Already kind of the great thing about this process that you guys are well aware of, it's very adaptive, right? Building off the building blocks. So, it's not the last time you'll see it. This may be the last time you see this exact version, but we will bring it back to Radio, TV.
Well, thanks for your help on the rotate, striping.
Like this, one thing that's so fast.
That's all. Like,
Well, and then exactly, Amy actually pointed out.
Right, little bars, on the tape. Well.
It's kind of like, it's kind of like, you know, I deal with like. Transit rides on my road, school bus ride on my road. Yeah, but I can go to them and, hey, I have instructions. So that would be good. Turn around and say, yeah, so we're not doing it.
Well, the- Like.
Right, I'm saying, for back.
Is you're looking at this from. If the general public. He did.
Regarding that.
How familiar are they? Planning, engineering, terminology, definition of those three.
That's what we find.
I think that's what we.
Now, so. That's actually. Not like simple things.
That's on my way to the
Rejection. Like. Those.
Then you got people on school bus.
All right, everybody, we really want to make sure. So I'm gonna pass forward to Jessica.
When we talked last, I guess I.
Very well.
We talked a little bit about, transportation. And so just kind of similar to the style we did last week where, we're gonna take notes on the jam board, but there were just a couple of things that I wanted to have everybody chance to look at. So some of the stuff that we've heard, so far, more sidewalks, that connect neighborhoods, schools, parks, businesses, other places of interest. That there's a desire to expand public transit options beyond moving north and south highway. And so that's what this is a photo of, is our gold line extension route, is our main, public transit option in the floor. And I noticed that was kind of hard to see where the stops were, so I have them listed over there for you guys. That we're interested in increasing the efficiency of traffic flow, especially in neutral areas. And that we're interested in providing safety improvements for all forms of transportation. So because we have a little bit less time this week than last week, I figured to get the ball rolling, I'd ask some questions. So just things to think about. What highly traffic areas could benefit from a bus stop? So you can see where they are kind of, just try to zoom in if that would help. But are there additional areas, maybe along this route or even down Mountain Road, Pasadena area that could benefit from a new stop? Are there any suggestions for improvements to existing stops? So the ones that are listed, you've driven past, you notice that there isn't a little bus shelter or something like that. And then are there any locations east and west of Richmond Highway that could benefit? Yeah. Anyone have any suggestions on transit while applying?
Really?
And not state. Yeah, state.
Yeah.
Mass
and
transit.
We did, a lot of people went to talk to the state about it, and it's sad when you see people just out there. Some places have, Annapolis has a lot more bus stops than we do. We don't have any that are.
Jurisdiction spending on money.
Having good bus stops would be great to try to solve it. If you want more people to take transit, use transit, make it easier for pleasant.
But then instance what, Bo was saying, like, and a state that is involved with that, like changing bus options, could that be something you would? Right, just.
Cash.
Well, I also like the idea of more shelters because I think that, homelessness is a problem. Throughout Animal, I just from my site of seeing people, and it would give a safer place for people living without to stay.
Yeah.
That's a.
I try to find. I got there, they didn't have schedule. I've been in other cities, have it right there in the bus when they come. So I think there are a lot of little things. More for the time. So I think there's another one, so there's,
Yeah.
About trying to come for that, which is great, but I don't know if it's just me, but I would like to see one map with all of the different options. of bus. It seems like we have to go to about 3 different websites to figure out what. the map is. I mean, the transit app is good for that, but I just like to have. Look at it on.
Did you try minutes? Do we have the option?
Yeah, I mean, I've looked at, I just found it.
There is a map.
Okay.
Good throw. Back way down here, it's totally out of left field, just give you a basis comparison. That the average trip now in the bus is providing. Anybody want to, that's about offering. And I'm charging you fair. Anybody have an idea how much? Trip costs?
60.
Sorry. Very good, 55. $55
per person.
per person.
Not enough population to run public transit.
They're always good.
See a lot.
Yeah. But people don't appreciate the average.
Not the ones that I see.
Right, yeah, rush hour. The bus the few people. It'll go. All the way down to Chicago. Don't pick up the other. And then the rest of the time to have effective transit. That way, like 15 minutes.
So I don't think here.
Get more involved, smaller units where the state is involved and make it more attractive on demand almost. But I just want to repeat what I heard when I went to MDOT for a meeting about transit, about 10 years ago. I was talking about talking of the policies. You only take people that have no other option.
I think that's representative of part of the problem is that I think generally the Animal County transit system does need more bus stops. But I think that the people who should be weighing in on where they go are if people are folks from lower income areas where that's usually their only option for transport. They should be the one weighing in on that because, I mean, of course, every region has areas with their lower income. But because those folks tend to be more concentrated in North County, those are the folks who should be weighing in on where bus stops should go. I think,
Shelters,
and shelters to go to. But I know I just have things on shelters, but maybe it's not so much that we didn't reach a core personally need more bus stops. But I believe that generally, and on we just may not be the people that's really on that.
Just kind of thinking broader is making sure we're all not talking apples and oranges. We've got state transit, which does the main state routes. But then we have, I don't know enough about I know you sent me some information, enough about the local. So there are two different ones. So if you see a bus going by and it's empty, are you talking about the big state highway or the MBA bus? Right, versus the local bus that's taking the elderly people around from the community to the senior center. So maybe it's not that we necessarily need more bus stops for the state bus, maybe we need more access to bring from the community to those bus stops. So I just want to make sure we're talking, there's two different kinds of modals here. And I know Harford County and I know Carroll County, they have the main state, the buses come through on the state routes, but the local transit is the county's program. It is not part of the motor vehicle administration or the MTA, Mass Transit Administration. They're two completely beasts. So, maybe the thought is, are we looking at, do we need more localized? And that's what we concentrate on, trying to, that would tie into the state system that's already there. And then it might be easier to think about if we build ours up, having the connection with the state than versus having the state come in. Because a lot of times you got to kind of throw it at the state and then go, oh, okay, we'll help you out and provide money for that too. So that's the other thing. I just want to make sure we're all kind of like not looking at.
Is there anyone here that knows whether the 70 bus, which is the state bus, does that somewhere intersect with some of the county
Yes,
buses?
they talk.
They do, okay, so it is possible to pick up 70 APSCO. You come down to Spring Park, catch a pickup.
I challenge transportation sometimes ride bus. How many people do you think rode the bus just to see what it's like? Look at it. The challenge is proof here, ride the bus.
Yeah, I grew up riding. Having school buses, we rode mass transit to school. That was our school bus.
Work now.
So I drive a car, but my car was in the shop and I drove downtown Baltimore. I took the bus. I put my car in the shop. I had to use 2 hours to leave on an hour on each end of the day because I had to get a daycare that I had to work around hours because it was twice as long by bus, but I did it. Oh, absolutely. I took the car. And you don't carpool because there's too many people that have kids, this, that, and the other. They're not going to carpool.
Amy, you were making an apple oranges thing. So, and remember when the folks from the aging department were here and we had that presentation with all the different options and the vans, pickups, you had to be, does this include those facilities and those options as well, or are we just talking about? Okay, this is just the fixed route trips. Okay.
Three of my faulty memory. But the way the bus route is about, I'm looking at how to pretty have a layer. So you look at the layer of income, you look at the layer that has vehicle ownership and that census tract. Or the 6 factors. That's the way bus routes are laid out. Bottom line is, poor people who think you're trying to serve, not show up. In fact, this is an unusual group right here, because you're here. There's 588,000 people in Arundel County. There's 74,000 in Pasadena, 74,000 looking at county council. So there's a lot of people.
Both in their own. Frequent enough, what do you think?
One of us.
Oh, right.
Think about 50, 56. That's right now. That's technically it's there. That's only outrageous. One penny. But if you got it right.
You only have to find one person.
They did. $15.
What?
2008. They put a lot, there's a lot of service goes, service availability goes up, cost, ridership.
Who's cares the money?
Fair tax.
Oh,
You, so, if these, county buses, if those drivers signed up for Uber, would they do better?
it sounds like. I have friends, he literally lost almost like 50 brought to Italy. He lives over by the Dolphins. Go that far. Bus would be 50, well, if you had.
Well, it's free. It's free for him.
Yeah.
But he can't get to it.
No, it's right, yeah. There is no bus. I just, point I'm trying to make it. Just look at what we, what I'm asking. What do we do? For all, how many people here live in apartments? How many people ride transit? We're suggesting that other people do this.
Population density, so then you're gonna go back to managing your growth and high population growth to get right.
Still doesn't only.
It's about 4 times the population we have. One.
Or make golf carts?
I could be wrong. That's me. But. The only. Numbers. Buses. Raise the gas tax by $2 or $3 a gallon. That would do it, right?
Exactly.
Now, I mean, that doesn't make good sense, but I do honestly believe if it's cheap enough, people are gonna drive their cars. I did it. I probably did 5,000 trips on buses and like.
Yeah, you had that great hilarious email about your, yeah, because I did that same one. I did the express bus, the light rail. And a lot of humanity.
You can do it. Not comfortable for me. Well, let me give you another example. My At one point in my career, my office was moved out of downtown Baltimore to Chevy Chase. And we were closing down a company, and the only people that had to go were like 10 of us. 9 of them drove. I took the MARC train to the Red Line out to Chevy Chase. And I was happy doing that. It wasn't a problem for me, but obviously I'm the oddball in terms of how I think of it.
Yeah, they thought you were jealous.
They thought, well, yeah, sure.
For most of our transit after the war.
But you gotta make it more expensive.
Be more. What's the reason for the deal? What's the price? Really see the 15 people. Your experiences are on your, here's the point, you.
I don't think the, impact of climate change will be able to figure out. There are people my age who are looking for more ways to incorporate, ways to do that individually. That lives. I think the plan is looking to specifically see more, maybe incorporate something to the plan for falling to look like. What's the word that's less severe than topic?
The word that you know is for. And
You know, as if you use of your car, you're contributing to minimizing the climate change. Like I think you offer like subsidy to people on up 10 times a month. You get something, a $5 gift card. That's totally right. But you know what I mean. People that were very no, that is really for so that is another, like, because we both line, like, the whole line, like, sure, I can take that to run errands or something, but like, I don't work.
Does anything go to the airport?
Yeah, that was, it was that, well.
Light rail.
But, yeah.
Still gotta take a bus. to
Cromwell Light Rail Station.
It's back on the drawing.
Also, maybe including something in the plan of, you know, being open to working with multiple jurisdictions, setting up plans, having concrete examples of plans of how collaboration between jurisdictions work with one another. And for that way, they get, I mean, the communication will make it easier to know where the stops is needed, and it would also create between what Amy mentioned, or what Amy was mentioning earlier about the.
I just, it's just something kind of. random thoughts, but I just want to get rid of it out there. Does anybody else see the irony in that we want to keep our suburban and our rural areas and we want that? But we want to turn around and say, but we want bus service and everything that the amenities of a more urban area has. I just think it's kind of ironic. You know, it's kind of, where do you do the overlap? And I mean, I just think it's funny.
The reality is that we only.
I said that people had to move to change. I was the only one
Right.
that decided.
Well, I think it's interesting too, it's, you know, it's, look at like DC to Frederick. That was I-27 or what is that? I forget the road. That for the longest time was like this little 2-lane in each way highway. And how many times have they widened it? Because you've got the suburban sprawl going to Frederick and those people are working at DC. And so then you have this group and traffic's getting ridiculous. And then they finally come in and say, okay, we need to do something. We need to put a rail line in it. So we're not even talking big transportation. We're just talking buses here. This is, I mean, if you want to talk climate change, I was reading an article today at lunch and it was about how, and this is overseas, but it was some town that their goal was to be zero emissions. And I thought it was ironic. They showed kind of some of their visions of what they're doing. They're going back to the old electric streetcars. And so, you know, sometimes it's not even just about what we have now and how we can improve it. Sometimes it might just be us going, what about streetcars on Ritchie Highway? That would make it easier for people and be better climate change. Or through the town centers or something like that.
I tell one story from my previous. Interview, I worked for transit. CFO, we had a regional administrators conference in Chicago. And the regional administrators came in, obviously, I'm already in Chicago, didn't fly yet. And that was Washington. I was the last one to go tell all this executive staff, regional administrators sitting here, Don, what happened? So what do you mean what happened to me? I took the CTA. Why didn't you take a super note? To a person, every one of them. This is the leadership. I was the only one. Repeat, I was the only one that took the CTA, was a straight shot from O'Hare into the loop. And I had, heaven forbid, a 2-block walk. But the rest of them all took super shuttle. And the point is, I was on a ride family. I'm sorry. I think
The other thing I'd like to throw in real quick, the last quick thought about the people that use it don't usually show up to these kind of forums and stuff. If you want to get feedback from the people that need it to use it, you've got to do boots on the ground. You've got to go out and do community meetings or canvassing or things like that, because those people are not going to come to meetings. So if you really want a true demographic of what those people need and use, you have to go to them before they're going to come to you.
On that note, so, staff is doing a lot of outreach as best we can. Right? The one thing that we really, the SAC really help out. So if there are areas that you see, well, give us let us know, we'll be there. It's been right back to you all. Everybody has as many responsibility is doing it. I know we're all working, we all have one working out 60%. We're all getting paid here, right? So really, there's reason for time is limited. So, but you please do outreach that you can, and if you can't, let us know. Tell us where it's terms. And on that note, we're about halfway through.
What are the bus stops? What are the bus drivers say?
that's.
I wasn't trying to shift us away from transit, but I just had one other slide that I thought could be helpful for this conversation. So when we're talking about, sidewalks and how we have a lot of. This is a map of one of five. Here they are and then which one. And so, guys, potentially live in these communities, are there any areas around you? So, not just sidewalks or curb cuts, bump outs, things like that.
It's very unsafe to access. There's no alternative. With like a shoulder like this. I mean, that's just
Have you seen?
a serious accident waiting to happen. Are they gonna win?
They're building a side, this sidewalk go. Way. No, that's what, hopefully that study will get to that, but it took 4 years. 4 years for $145,000.
They didn't cross a busy road, so the one neighborhood didn't buy it. But a lot of neighborhoods that are close, there's no way.
On the Broadneck Peninsula. Bill Ferrer over there was on the Broadneck Council with me. 4 acres road there. They're building the third phase of the Broadneck Trail. It's coming back. And there's a sidewalk coming down from Broadneck Elementary that doesn't connect quite to the trail. It would make a whole lot of sense to spend the money to connect a mile of roadway. All right. To connect these schools to the trails, it may improve transportation things because more people walk them out and walk safely or reduce transportation costs and things like that. That's a major one on the Broadneck Peninsula of the list that you have of safe routes to schools would be. As they're connecting the Broadneck Trail, I realize that's a today thing and not a future thing, but it would be a good time to do it with the plug in for anybody that's listening. 150 feet, is that all it is? Okay, it's less than half a mile.
There's a lot of spaces where there's nice, and I mean, I love the College Parkway stretch. There's a lot of places where there's gaps, so like, that seems like, wouldn't that be easy, just put those in, and we have a lot of.
I'll give you an example in Cape St. Clair when they went to build a mile worth of sidewalks. It took 13 years to acquire all the land.
I was gonna say.
So it just, you say easy, but eminent domain is not an easy thing if you don't own it at the end.
Book Urban Better program in another county. And just to kind of give you a quick understanding of, a lot of times the idea is there. It's, I have locations and their own school routes that I can't buy because there's utilities that it's too expensive to move them. There's underground culverts. There's people that you have everybody on the block except for one person who doesn't want to sell the land or let you have an easement. And so it's not that the program doesn't want to happen. It's that there's a lot of stuff that gets in the way of getting it done. The other half I wanted to say is I also reviewed the development plan. In what I have found is sidewalks and safe routes. And over the past 20 years, this is something that's kind of like becoming more of a thing. It didn't used to be. It didn't used to be. So you have an older development that didn't have sidewalks, and you have a brand new development that has sidewalks now. And so they have on the outside on the main road, they have that piece that stubs up right here. And then you got the older community that's there like, hey, what about us? It's okay for our kids to play in the street. Why, you know? So part of it is making sure, and maybe this is just going back to our highway people at the county and saying, please make sure when you're reviewing these plans that you're looking at where the tie-ins are for the sidewalk programs and where they tie into the various trails. That's part of when I review development plans. I'm reviewing the walkability. type thing. Because what happens is if you don't get in the process of reviewing development plans, if those comments are put in at the beginning, when they're getting their concept plan approved, and you come down the road, the developer's like, yeah, well, you didn't say it back then, so I ain't gonna do it now. And so then the county has to pay for it. So it's one more thing to get involved in, but paying attention to the different development programs that are coming up. You can get emails for your area of what's coming up and they'll show you a plan.
Maybe, what's that? Sorry.
No, you're good.
What's it called? What are those amenities that the development has to put in? They're called something. It's like
Betterments.
what's that?
Easement, or something.
Yeah, but there's like necessary accommodations or something, or facilities, or. There you go. Adequate public facilities. Oh, it doesn't include,
No.
Review those standards. and make sure that-
so, wait, adequate public facilities?
Yep.
Number. Already.
So do we, as making this recommendation, would it be within our purview to maybe expand adequate public facilities to include?
It's not our facilities, I don't want to use that limit. Yeah, yeah. Development divisions, requirements during the development process, to make sure that they have, adequate, everything for sidewalks. And utility lines. They've already got them.
The Safer to Schools, what is that run by?
So this is state program, and this is the county has a list of about 17 elementary schools that they're piloting.
Do we actually have to say how this happened? Do we just say have sidewalks, on school? Quarter of a mile,
We already talked about that. The point of this slide is just to see if there's any, where you know that there was sidewalk, but use like. But yeah, I think Emma had a comment.
Just to make it a little bit more specific, I told you the case, the area around it is in desperate need of more sidewalks. Not just in terms of it's on the route to the school, but just for child safety in general. I live on that road. I live at the very back of Arundel, up on the beach road. It's a winding thing that is always has. Up to the point.
Making like a list of like actual road names, like you were saying,
They're thinking on
you
that.
like it, Emma has her list from that school. I don't know, what?
So the way I was thinking-
No, I mean, the list of the roads that, like,
But also we don't have to stay limited to because I just want to have the slide there. to see what's on because we can talk about anything you guys. So I think the goal is definitely to have all of our have safe routes to schools. Maybe just the ones that are starting with, but for sure, for the, yeah, putting sidewalk on one road for help, for sure.
One other point, just my experience, and I tend to be a sweet wheel, that's why I guess why I'm in here. But traditionally, all the different agencies, schools, park and recs, DPW, water sewer, they're all in their own little silos. They don't talk to anybody. They don't talk to each other, that kind of thing. This whole communication thing, I mean, we all know it's been a problem forever, but it's a new concept that, hey, I pick up the phone and I call transit and say, I need you to move your bus stop because I got construction going on. They're like, oh, sure, we could do that. And then my boss goes, how did you have that done? And I'm like, I just asked them, so it's this thing. So it's seriously, it's, if you know that Park and Rec is doing a project and it's going to be near the school and there's already a path at the school, which is now the school board's issue, call the school board, call the Park and Recs and say, hey, do you realize that your project's right by this other project? And see how it, and kind of encourage them to talk to each other.
So you said this is about any transition. Yeah, we covered any. Well, I just wanted to highlight. Honestly, guys, push me, and I feel like I need to say what she said. Thank you. Anyway, they might not remember this. He can probably help in the future. She's talking about separate goals and
Certainly, I wasn't here as you walked in. When she called, it was in reference to traffic management, I think, is our key topic to actually see. Of course, this is the system. When you're online, you can go through every modification, everything's available. The county has done a much better job of making it public, so you can actually see what things are submitted. But you can check a permit, you can check the submission plans, the community meetings, the entire time flow, OPZ comments along the way, administrative hearing officer, if it's a variance, special exception, appeals. So any person can access this, sign up for alerts to be alerted, but she was only talking about the traffic management. I think all of us in different development have had issues with the way the traffic management studies are done in different areas in the county, especially with certain roadways, ingress, egress, all these different things. I don't think there's something you can do today to change something that's been approved, especially if it's followed a process. Many of the ones in that area you're talking about were approved 5 and 6 years ago. So there's nothing to change. We'd have to find out exactly which development is on around that are sitting on here that are in various stages of construction, but it's all available for anybody to search at any time. I know Steve, somebody who studies these things on the Broad Neck Peninsula and through infrastructure in particular. I know Ann has done so with GAN for years. Lynch, Phil, John, myself. It's all available within there. You can literally go to every subdivision application, look through it, see what they're approving, not approving. And this past week for traffic management on, was it Jumpers? Benfield, it was Benfield discounted.
We're great.
Right, and got the answers he needed within a week's time during Thanksgiving. So
Yeah.
people communicate that with the different agencies, you can get the answers if you ask. Well, I don't know, like somebody that comes to a meeting like this that about something you approved previously, it's kind of tough, but I think what we're doing here is, can you set the rules up so that it's done correctly and people follow process? I'm not going to go out on a limb and say the county didn't follow the process, because typically they follow a process. Whether or not you agree with that process is a different statement of how it goes and how many community meetings and how many actions. But typically, I would say it's been years in progress before it's to the community meeting level that we get to comment on it. Traffic and transportation availability. And those are all things that I think recommendations will eventually come out that gets the county council. At the end of the day, it's whether or not it gets approved or not. That's nothing that we can control. You can only make the recommendation.
And you should be able to review that, I'm sorry, you should be able to review the, as part of the documents, one of them is the traffic impact study. Development, yeah, that's in there, and that's where they study the area and what the different uses for the area are, the demographics, and they do traffic counts, and they kind of look at, okay, this is what's here now, if we're putting this in here, this many houses, how's that gonna affect the traffic that's already there? So that's all part of the traffic impact study that has to be done with these as well.
And we have the same tracker that goes on. County doesn't pay.
It's all the ones
Developers.
just this year.
Traffic concept.
Exactly.
It's the end of the night. Those who can on this discussion, if there's anything else on your attention on before we wrap up. Definitely.
Word that never came out of all. If you look at the plan 2040, that's not really. The point is, what's the problem that we're talking about? Transit, it's implied that that's the solution, right? That's why we're talking about transit, congestion, and how we throw it. Carbon.
So maybe we should turn it back to the public. More minutes. That are. How about the people that are? Getting in the- now,
I'm here because of transportation. My name is Sandra Bishop. I'm with Bike AAA. Also work on the advisory committee with Baltimore Regional Transportation Board. What I didn't hear in here was any comment about the stakeholders who are not in this room, people with disabilities. People with disabilities who are, their disability impacts their choice of transportation. I have 3 daughters, young adults. They don't drive. They will never drive. Productive adults. I have one daughter who works at the Safeway over on Benfield. There is no transportation for her to get there other than family. If she takes Uber or rideshare, it costs her 2 hours of her 8-hour pay. So rideshare is an option, but it's not an affordable option. And 20% of the US population has a disability. Not all 20% affects their transportation, but things like the state bus locations, bus stops, those factor in for people with disabilities. If they can get mobility link, they have to be within 3/4 of a mile of the state bus stop. There aren't very many. If you're in Pasadena or you're on the far side of the park, you're not within 3/4 of a mile of the bus stop. You have to get yourself to within 3/4 of a mile to be able to use mobility link. So when you start looking at your transportation things, think about modality. What are all the other ways people need to get around? You all drove here. The stakeholders you said that aren't present, they're not here because they don't drive, but there's no transportation to get to this location at this time of day. How many of you rode a bike somewhere today or this week? Transportation involves more than just commuting to work. We talked about the schools, but there's local jobs, there's people with disabilities, there's errands. You can do short trips and talk about congestion. You can get a lot of those little 1, 2, 3, 4 mile trips off the roads. It opens things up. You love the suburbs. I love living here in Savannah Park. But we've got all of these island communities that aren't connected to each other unless you go out to the artery roads. Connect them so that the kids can get from community A to community C to the school without ever having to go near those artery roads. There's some simple, honest, practical solutions. Think about them when you're talking about transportation and coming up with this big plan. Appreciate it.
thank you very much. That's very helpful. Anybody else have something? Say your name.
I'm trying to get
You can stay seated.
I'm bad back. My name is Matt Lynch, President of the Council.
the vision statement, as I look at it, I know it's possible and in progress. But if we don't have authority, it's just. And for all the hours that many of us and have spent testifying at county council meetings, where you knew a development. You knew that even Karen is still looked like you have to write recommendation. It is so discouraging. We have no authority. We hope to influence people, but there's no guarantee. And if you are close to your county councilor, you're always competing with their time too. So that is so important. Many of us have been through so many different small plans. And I thought it was great to see it. It's SAC form. And again, it was a lot of desire. No. Secondly, traffic studies are inadequate. Every time we go against traffic concept on an intersection where we know they're going to win because they are listened to, and we again have no authority. So we're competing against traffic concepts who does a minimal study at these intersections, and then we're stuck with the result. And we live here, we know what the problems are. Even our councilmen don't know because they don't cover the entire territory. On disabilities, yes, you're absolutely right. Bus is not an option for many people, and it's not just people with disabilities, it's the elderly. When you get older, you are less agile. So I will be buried in my car. There is nobody who can tell me that I am going to ride a bus. And I am from Queens, New York. We live on buses. We never used our car. There was no parking. But I could stand at the end of the corner of where my development was, and I could be by bus in the village in a mile in 10 minutes. Take the subway, I could be on Fifth Avenue in 20 minutes. We don't have that here. We live in the Broadneck Peninsula. You can't possibly wait for a bus to come out there. Time is money. Time is money. I don't have the time to wait. Anybody else?
I keep hearing frequently, and I applaud the Arundel County administration for increasing our access. That's vital to loving the Bay. One of the things that may help us to understand how big or how important this issue is there's 600,000 people in the town, an area of probably about 800 square miles. How many of those 600,000 people have private access to the water? How many of them have public access to the water? For example, in Bo's community, all X thousand people living in Cape St. Clair have private access to the water because they've got beaches and marinas, etc. I guess the same thing can be said in my community. But there are many of the people in Anne Arundel County who don't have private access. Many of those people have public access, and that public access comes from the top launching sites. It comes from the one state park. It comes from a place like a Truxton Park. I would have to think that we could possibly do a small study that could quantify how many of the 600,000 people do not have private access, how many of them don't have public access. That might help to quantify how important that issue is, both to the vision statement as well as the county executive, his staff, his stated objective of increasing water access. It might not be so hard to figure out how big that issue is among the 600,000 people. The issue on this lady here on access following up on your comment on living on a bus as a child, and Pat's comment of living in Queens. To try to put it into visual perspective, we sit with 600,000 people in an area about the size of New York City with 6 million people. So it's an order of magnitude of 10 to 1. If you live in Queens or you live in Greenwich Village and you work in Harlem or you work in Brooklyn, you're never going to drive. You'll never get there. It'll cost you a fortune to own that car and use the garage there. But there's a period of interlocked F lines, X lines, front lines, blue lines, red lines, etc., to get anywhere in the 5 boroughs quickly. We can't do that, and it's almost not worth even trying to attempt to do so by the gold line and such thing as that. But we really know who the constituency is. Who are the people we're trying to move from Cromwell? Do we know who they are? Do we know how many of them there are? Do we know if any of them really want that move? Those are some of the things I think really don't understand. I don't hear an understanding of it.
We don't have much more time. Yeah, I'd just like to mention things.
One just one reminder, tomorrow, Tuesday, 6 p.m. Eastern District Police Station. January 10th, Eastern District Police Station, 6 p.m.
2 years.
We, staff, try to get the Monday meeting early. Booked up. So we did our best to get the next close available date. So we're giving that about 2 months, month and a half, 2 months of time to try to make it work.
That's very hard.
Okay, well, then we can go back and reevaluate. I'll send a pull out for the first bids. If we can aim maybe for the 11th, something that week, just so we can stay on the time. Contract, recommendations. Yeah. But
That
so,
sounds like a good. Already said.
And a meeting plan follows a lot of outrage.
but yeah, we're doing our best to get enough heads up. We're not having a December meeting. We're doing our best to get enough heads up, make sure. Quick time. And that is, so yeah,
You said the 23rd was at the police station now?
no, it's the 23rd, I'm winning approval, but the 23rd will be.
Thank you.
So you're running 2 meetings in January. It's not gonna-
What comes up?
Good.
I'm waiting for that.
Well, I'm gonna send out a schedule this week, the SAC members. I posted on the reading website as well. It's aacounty.org/. Or from there, we'll have a quick description of each meeting in the future. And then if we have-
Well, no, I think that there is.
I just love it. I love you guys.